So I guess before we start here, I know a lot of you guys have been following me for a while, so I'm sure many of you actually have, caught on to my strategy at least a little bit. So I'm sure some of you have a pretty decent idea of what I look at. But I want to ask you guys from your perspective, what are some key things or key kind of ideas that you get um, when watching me trade, or what's incorporated inside of my trading strategy, do you guys think? Any ideas? You could type it out, or you could just talk on chat, talk on voice. Anybody?
Okay, everyone is quiet, so I will go ahead. Uh, uh, I I think Alex, what you are trading is you are trying to time in a reversal
Hmm.
and uh, using a multiple individual stock confluence, and so that that says, for example, Microsoft, Apple, and Nvidia,
Yeah.
are already 25% of weighting of the Nasdaq. So if three of them are consistently going one direction, and the chance NQ going the same direction is
Hmm.
very high, and I think that's basically what you are using mostly.
Hmm.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much it, right? So a good chunk of the time, right? Every single time I take a trade, I'm always using individual names to actually guide the trade, right? And the reasoning for that is because exactly what you said, Chin, right? Why will QQQ and SPY move a certain way? Well, the main reason for that is just going to be based off, individual names, right? Why? What is an ETF, right? An ETF is a grouping of different individual names incorporated into one ticker, right? That ticker here going to be QQQ and SPY. Now, why do we trade QQQ here more so rather than SPY? Well, the main reason for that is, if you guys already don't know, right, QQQ is going to be a tech ETF. So a really good way to actually get a visual of this is if we actually take a look at the heat map. I don't know if you guys are going to be familiar with the heat map, but we have a heat map here on Thinkorswim. And pretty much what this is showing here, this is showing every single stock within, whatever ETF or indice that, you're going to be looking at. So here we have the S&P 500. If you see on the left hand side, right, that's going to be the name. And then here we have a list of every single individual ticker as well as the sector that it's going to be correlated to. Right? So when we're
Sorry, you
sorry,
showing the screen. Sorry.
sorry, I did forget about that. There we
Yeah.
go.
Thank you. Sorry.
All right, I'll give you guys some time to take a look at that. All right, so yeah, what we're looking at right here, this is going to be called the heat map right on Thinkorswim. It's right to the left of charts. If you go to Market Watch and then Visualize, here we have what's called the heat map, and then right now we're looking at the S&P 500, right? So under this heat map, right, like I said, you could see every single individual ticker that's incorporated into the S&P 500. So if you were to sit here and count out, every single box here, you should be able to count out roughly about 500 different names here. And then you could see right in the center, you have each sector of the market, right? So there's a total of 11 different sectors in the market, roughly. And you can see that with the S&P 500, right? It has sectors or it has stocks from every single sector, right? Now, why is that important? Well, this is important because when we are actually looking at, either SPY and QQQ, and you'll notice, right? That's the only two tickers that I have up, right? Because I don't have the Russell and I don't have the Dow up. Now, the reasoning for that is because when I take a look at SPY, this gives me an overall general view of how our market is going to be currently performing. Now, how do I know that? Well, the reasoning I know that is because, right, SPY here has stocks from every single market sector. So, if every single market sector is going to be doing well, right, you could expect the S&P 500 to be doing well. and obviously, right, and so on. But when we are actually taking a look at this heat map, it's important to see, one or two things kind of happen here. One thing that I'd usually would like to see is some type of sector rotation, happening when actually taking a look at the heat map, and especially taking a look at the S&P 500. So the heat map will tell me, okay, maybe healthcare sector is doing poorly today, whereas the financial sector is doing extremely well today, right? Looking at this can definitely tell me whether or not, one area of the market is going to be doing better than another, which is why a lot of the times, right, I really try and focus on sector rotation between, the uh, different sectors, or um, different industries, of the market, which is kind of like the same thing. But yeah, like I said, the main reason why I don't trade, SPY is because, like I said, it's overall a general view of the market. Whereas if we switch over to the NASDAQ, aka QQQ or NQ, right, we see that the overall, heat map shrinks down a little bit. Um, Now, the main reason why the NASDAQ 100 is called the NASDAQ 100 is because it has 100 different, tickers in it. But the main thing that's going to be important here is that, its overall net holdings. We can see that, some of the largest holdings within the actual NASDAQ is going to be those names that we actually look for and that we, trade on a day to day basis, right? Remember, when I'm in a trade, what names do I look at? I look at NVIDIA, I look at Microsoft, Google, and Apple, right? And the main reason for that is because they make up a very, very good chunk of the overall, ETF or indice, right? They make up a really good amount, which Chin said is roughly about 20 to 25%, I believe. Whereas with the S&P 500, yes, you can see that, right? Based on the boxes here, they are still extremely large. However, it's not going to have as big of an impact as NVIDIA, right? So when we're taking a look at SPY here, I believe, the top 10 holdings with SPY only make up about 15%. Whereas once again, right, when we take a look at NQ, right, the top 10 holdings, aka NVIDIA, Microsoft, Apple, and Google, right, they make up roughly, like I said, about 20 to 25 or maybe even 30%. I forget the exact number, but it's going to be definitely a lot more compared to SPY, right? So, with that being said, if we actually come back to the chart, and then every single one of these tickers are moving, in a correlated direction, we would definitely expect to see, QQQ follow that same direction as well. And we could actually see that so far. So what we're going to do here, we're going to compare literally every single ticker here. And this is something that I do in order to kind of give a good comparison of how each ticker has an effect on the actual market. So we're going to take a quick look at all of these names here. So remember, everything is really just going to go back to that heat map, right? What names are we going to be paying attention to? NVIDIA, Microsoft, Apple, and Google. And also a little bit of Amazon as well, but it is mainly going to be those 3 to 4 names here. Right? So what could this potentially tell us? Well, just looking at the chart between QQQ and SPY here, right, you could see that Q's is popping up a little bit more here compared to SPY. Now, why is that? Well, the reasoning for that is because one of these individuals here has a little bit more strength than others, and I'm sure you could already probably see which name it is, but the name here is definitely going to be Apple, right? So the main reason why I like, using these names as confluence is because all you need a lot of times is just one name to actually drag the market down, right? Or even one name to actually hold the market up. So it's going to be really important to know how each one of these tickers actually move, because all you need, like I said, is one name to move differently compared to the others, and that single individual itself, especially if it's going to be like Apple or Nvidia, you know, even though a lot of these names have a similar weighted average, that small, 2 or 3% difference really can be, a difference maker when it comes to actually, dragging down the market or actually holding up the market. So in this case, like I said, we could definitely see that Apple overall is going to be a leader in, this move that's kind of coming in right here. But what this can actually do, if Apple is actually starting to gain some traction, a lot of times this will actually drive, some of these other individuals to actually follow through and follow along with Apple as well. And then once that actually happens, that could allow for a little bit more of a larger push to come in from the actual ETF or the NASDAQ. So that's kind of going to be a quick version of being able to look at indices and just trying to use individual tickers as guides. But what is another thing that I actually do to incorporate, you know, other confluences into the actual strategy? So one of the next things that we're going to look at is actually going to be my indicator. So you see, if I go to my chart, right, I really don't have a whole lot of indicators. I have about 2 lines here and technically 2 different support and resistance levels. So if I go to my indicators, I have VWAP, and I have the 200 EMA. Now the biggest thing that I use is going to be VWAP, and then I use the 200 EMA for a little bit more of a larger setup. So in reality, I actually only use VWAP on my day-to-day trading. And the reasoning for that is because, right, as day traders, we trade what's kind of being given to us, right? And we trade the price action of how we're moving. So we don't really need a whole lot of indicators. Now, why is that? Well, I don't know if you guys noticed, but a lot of the indicators that we use actually lag behind, and they may not be 100% accurate, which is why I don't really use a lot of indicators, right? I know some of you might use the stochastic slow, which actually is a good one. I actually do like that one still to this day, but for the most part, VWAP probably is going to be my favorite indicator that I use on a day-to-day. And then the 200 EMA is going to be a little bit more of a larger time frame indicator for me. So I use VWAP as an indicator, and then I also use a script that was created on Thinkorswim, or that I created on Thinkorswim, which is going to be an automatic previous high and low of day indicator script. So you see here, I have the red lines here, which is going to mark out the previous high and previous low of day. And then I also have some white lines here. And these white lines are going to be levels at the overnight high and the overnight low session. Now I know many people may not actually agree with me in terms of the way I actually draw my overnight highs and overnight lows, because technically when you actually look at, the aftermarket session, or just look at this gray area here, you technically should have 2 separate lines to indicate what is going to be considered the overnight session and what is going to be considered the pre-market session. But for me, in my point of view and from my experience, I incorporate all of this into, one area, right? I don't see these two as, different movement areas. So when I do decide to chart my overnight session, overnight highs and overnight lows, I will literally just go to the gray box and pinpoint what is the highest point and what is the lowest point within this gray area. So technically starting from about 4:05, or technically starting about 4 o'clock, up until 9:30, I will chart out the highest and the lowest point. And that right there is going to give me my overnight highs and overnight lows. So we can see here, the highest point from the close is going to be up here. And then the lowest point from the actual close, or right before the open, right, is going to be all the way technically right here on this wick. That is how I would chart my overnight highs and overnight lows. Now, why is this going to be important? Well, one reason is that it's almost going to initiate some type of breakout trade or some type of reversal trade. So this will give me an idea of where our potential range could be within a certain day. So when we have our previous high and low of day marked out, we a lot of times will also have some type of, overnight highs and overnight lows, sitting within relatively the same area of where we're currently trading in. Otherwise, some things that may not be accurate with this is if we have, some type of gap up or some type of gap down. Now, when we have gap ups or gap downs, those can be a little bit harder to trade. For me, just based off of the levels that I use. But besides that, I would also like to incorporate, previous day's price action and how we actually ended up moving. So, how do we actually use these levels here? Well, the first thing that I always do every single day is one, I obviously chart out the levels, and then two, I always pay attention to where we're opening up on the day. Now, why is that? Well, if we're opening up within previous day's range, that technically is still indicating a potential inside day, which means that we could actually still ping pong back and forth within this region here. All right, if we really wanted to anyways. However, if we are able to get a break either above that previous high of day or a break below that previous low of day, that's when we can actually start assuming that there is going to be a break of structure. Now, how do we know that? Well, a lot of times, what is a break of structure? Well, if I go over here and then I draw out this concept that I've always been telling people to pay attention to, right? This is a structure that we get every single second of the day. It doesn't matter which way it forms. Where'd it go? This is a concept that we see every single day, right? And this is going to be, right, you could consider this a bull flag, bear flag, it doesn't matter, but this will be a rally and a basing structure here, right? So we have our initial rally and then we have our base. This structure we see form every single day, but what's unclear is the direction that we're heading to after we get this basing structure. So if you are able to identify, some type of structure like this, chances are you can already assume that there is going to be some type of break of structure here. So, like I said, the thing about this is that it's a little bit unclear because one, right, this rally based structure can either A, set us up for another leg higher, or B, it will set us up for a full on reversal. Alright, so this structure right here, this rally and base, technically rally and basing here, this is something we'll see every single day. But like I said, what's unclear is what type of move we'll get after that, right? Because we could head technically into any direction after that. So if we actually go back and take a look at, the setup that we have here and how we actually open on a day-to-day, this will actually indicate a lot of the times the same exact structure as what I just drew here, right? When we open up inside of previous day's range, this is going to indicate, us opening up or staying inside of this basing area. So then once we actually get a break of either A, high the previous high of day, or B, below the previous low of day, this will indicate that actual break of structure, which will then set us up for, a possible new trend. So here, right, actually is going to be actually quite a nice example here. Let me just clear up my charts a little bit. So you'll actually see this structure play out very often. As I mentioned, right, the rally-based rally structure. We have a rally, we have a base. But what happened on this particular day here? So once again, another base. 1 second, let me pull this back a little bit more. Right, rally-based rally structure. So we'll go back over here, I guess. So here we have a little bit of a rally, and then we have our basing. So our basing is going to be formed based off of, where our previous day's range is and whether or not we're actually breaking above that area. So we can see here that there's definitely some type of clear base around here, right? So here we see in that we had an initial breakout of that structure. Looks like it was a failed breakout, but then actually we kind of come back up. And then what happens? Once we are able to get this break of that structure, a good confirmation would to be a back test into it. So this was here, looks like probably more of a fake breakout, but then actually during the after hour session or pre-market session, we seen that we actually popped up broke out of the structure, right? So it was once initial resistance right here, then got flipped into support. And you'll notice, right? Take notes of where we are actually opening up at. Right here, this is going to be this current day's previous high of day. And then when we actually open up on the day, where are we going to be opening up at? We are going to be opening up above previous high of day, which indicates what? This is going to be indicating that there is some type of break of structure, as we are no longer sitting with inside of, this larger range here. So once we actually got that break above previous high of day, a lot of times when we do get that move, we can actually already assume that there could be a potential trend day, right? So there's are two things. We could see a trend day that will actually look to continue, or a lot of times when we actually open up above this structure here, we would actually like to see a back test of it. So sometimes what could happen is when we actually get this break above that high of day, we would usually see a back test, and then from here, this is when we would, determine whether or not we are going to use this area as support, or whether or not we'll actually pull back inside of previous day's range. So this level in particular, the previous high and previous low of day, is going to be really important when it comes to actually, determining my actual targets or determine my entry. So a lot of times you will actually see me take a position, based off this trade here. All right, so that is going to be that. And then the next indicator that I use is going to be VWAP as well. So how is VWAP potentially going to be used when it comes to actually looking to trade this strategy? Well, VWAP really is just going to be a backtest indicator for me, right? So whenever we get some type of backtest or some type of sell-off, I'll either use, once again, VWAP as a potential target or potential entry point for when I'm looking to actually take a position, or even a potential stop, right? So it's going to act pretty much as exactly as a support and a resistance zone, similar to how I would use it with, the previous high, low of day, and also the overnight highs and overnight lows. So I do want to take a look at a trade that maybe we took sometime this week. That way we could break it down a little bit more here. So let's see. Alright, so yesterday we ended up taking a long 936, which was about here. Okay, so this was our long trade. Right, and then also another thing that is going to be extremely important is the time frame and perspective that you're keeping an eye out, on every single trade. Because right, the setup can be valid, however, it can be valid within different time frames. So when you are in a trade here, it is going to be important to understand, what type of trading time frame that you're going to be on and what type of setup it's going to be on. As if you are oversized, right, and you're trying to play a larger time frame move, right, a lot of times that will actually, potentially stop you out. But yeah, what we're going to do here, we're going to take a look at this actual trading day right here, when we are kind of trending here. And then I'm going to go over that previous trade that I took yesterday. So let me go back to NQ that we could see the exact entries. Okay, so it was about, yeah, right about here. Okay, yeah, so with this trade here, I'm correct, yeah, so it was about here under the 5-minute time frame. We have our overnight high level right here, and we also have our overnight low that is sitting slightly below us. And this is the exact thing that I was actually watching with the yesterday's trade, right? So once again, it's going to go back to that rally-based rally structure that, I was talking about previously. So first thing, right, that I do every single day is I always check on the larger time frame, right? I'm checking on the 4-hour structure to see, how we're actually moving on the current day. And then I believe yesterday, right, we were sitting right about here, yeah, for the open, roughly about here on Thursday. And then one thing that I am noticing here, right, is what we are actually sitting above this overnight level here. So this level that I actually drew out, right, I drew out from the overnight lows to overnight highs on that current day. So the overnight low, right, would be this level right here. And then the overnight high would actually be all the way up here, as on, because yesterday we did actually have data. We had jobless claims data, which you can see here, this is going to be that data candle. So it doesn't matter whether or not we have data or not, I'm always going to draw from the highest point. So the highest point within that trade, or within the overnight session, is going to be right here. And then the lowest point is going to be down right at this 19,100 level. So now how do I use this? Well, if I was looking at that 4-hour structure after drawing the overnight lows and overnight highs, we could see that that 19,100 level, which was going to be the overnight lows, actually is now flipped into a support. Now, how do I know that? Well, just looking at this area, we've seen that this little spot right here, this looks like a pretty decent sized range that we're sitting at, right? If we look at the previous candles over here, and even over here, right, we see that there's definitely a little bit of choppiness within this area. But, just taking a look back at this, right, this particular move right here, we use this 19,100 level initially as a resistance, right? You see kind of coming up to it, right? We started to stall here a little bit. Stall, even pull down a little bit, pull down a little bit. But then what happened? The day after that, we actually ended up getting a breakout candle above that 19,100. And then during that overnight session is when we actually got our first back test into that support, right? So it was once resistance, then got flipped to support. So that right there is going to be an indicator that, okay, we are definitely probably going to be starting to see some buying come in within this 19,100 area. And this right here would definitely be a decent area of support, or a potential backtest area if we were looking to, take a long if we did decide to sell off in the morning there. But like I said, we did have data yesterday at 8:30, which is why we kind of had this little bit more of a larger candle there. And that's when the markets actually open right about 9:30. So this right here roughly was going to be our opening candle right about there. So I want you now to take notes of where we're opening up at, right? Once again, right, on that 4-hour structure, we were sitting within a basing area, right? If you look even on a 5-minute, we can see we've been choppy for the past 2 days. And then that data candle, right? This data candle in particular was the first candle to actually send us higher. And then now we're actually starting to stall. So what goes on from here now? Well, like I said, one thing I'm keeping note of is where we're actually going to be opening up on the day. So on the day here, we opened up one above previous high of day, right? This red line right here is going to be previous high of day. And then what I was waiting for was going to be an initial breakout. So actually going back to the individual tickers yesterday morning, what were some trades that guided, or what were some individuals that guided that actual trade? And a lot of times actually it is going to be the individuals, right? Yesterday was a big confluence when it actually came to individuals, as a lot of them had relative strength going into the actual open. So I think actually this might be a little bit better for me to actually pull up the YouTube video. That way we could actually see that almost during live. So that's what I'm actually going to do now. I'm going to pull up the YouTube video. That way we could actually see how that trade actually performed. So you guys should be able to see this. Like I said, we're going to break this down a little bit more. I don't know why it's not popping up like that. So alright, we're gonna break down this trade here pretty much during the live. So we're gonna go to the trade. Okay. So right, I want everyone to pay attention to where we're sitting at when it comes to actually just looking at, all of the individuals, right? Remember, keep in mind the red lines or red dotted lines are going to be the previous high of day most of the time. The white lines are going to be either the overnight highs and the overnight lows, and then we obviously have the red line that's in the center. So red line is going to be VWAP right there. Okay, so I want you guys to really just pay attention to, what's going on with this current price action. And then I'm also going to speed this up just a little bit. That way things move a little bit faster here. So what are some things that, I'm noticing here? Well, one, everything is nearing some type of support right here, right? If you actually take a look at the individuals, what type of structure are we getting in terms of, these names? Well, we see here that Apple, right, did actually ended up getting a break below VWAP, but what are we back testing right here? We're getting a back test of previous high of day, right? So what is this going to tell us? Well, this could actually potentially be a break and retest structure, because remember, a lot of times what I was saying earlier is when we have a previous high of day structure, the previous high of day usually is going to be the top of that range. So when we have a range, right, we have the initial pull, and then we have the formation of the base, right? And like I said, the base usually a lot of times is going to be indicated by the previous high of day, and the bottom trend line is going to be indicated by the previous low of day. So what did we get from Apple on this current day? Well, what happened was with Apple, we ended up getting some type of breakout, and then Apple actually ended up getting a back test of that level. So this is something that we actually see a lot of times when we're actually looking to play a breakout trade. As what we would want to do, we would want to see a break of that structure and a back test into it to see whether or not we actually want to use this area as support or not. So once we're able to actually confirm that this area is going to be used as support, that's when it'll actually probably send us for another leg higher. So that's actually exactly what happened with the structure we got from Apple there. So Apple right there was getting that back test into previous high of day. We see that Microsoft here as well, right? Definitely a little bit weaker, but what am I noticing? There is previous high of day also sitting right below. So this is going to be very similar to Apple, right? Um, Apple is getting that sell, same with Microsoft, but right, it has previous high of day sitting right here, which could be a break and retest structure. Once again, similar structure with Nvidia here. Nvidia here is going to be holding what? It's going to be holding the previous high of day once again. So it's going to be, all of these names are really just correlating with each other in terms of just, looking for that potential, range breakout or breakout structure from, that previous day's range. So if we are actually able to use this as support, if all of these names are sitting at some type of support, what is that going to potentially tell us? That if all of these names are sitting at a support, a lot of times that's usually going to mean that we would see some type of buying start to come in within this area. So if all of these names or all of these individuals are starting to get bought up all at once, what is that going to do to actually QQQ, right? That's going to actually send us quite high, especially if we have some extra confluences, within this overall setup. So if we're actually taking a look at some other confluence here, we could actually see NVIDIA, right? NVIDIA here has a little bit of a flagging structure, right? This is what type of structure? This is going to be a bull flag structure. So what is this going to tell us? Well, usually when we see this bull flag structure, this is going to tell us that we should expect to see another leg up. So one, that's going to be a bullish confluence. Another bullish confluence is going to be that every single one of these names here is going to be above previous high of day. Apple, Microsoft, Nvidia are above previous high of day. Nvidia did also get a backtest of VWAP. As I said previously, right? VWAP can be used as an area of support, similar to how it could be used as previous high of day. Same exact thing actually with QQQ here, right? QQQ is going to be opening above where? QQQ is going to be opening up above previous high of day. So, I believe I did already take the trade here, but yeah, so I ended up taking that trade right at 19,357. So yeah, pretty much right where we're sitting at right now. And then what was I actually looking for here? I was looking for Apple to one, like I said, hold this previous high of day. I was looking for Microsoft to hold this previous high of day, and I was also looking for Nvidia to break above, that flagging structure. So if you guys remember yesterday, right? The second we get some type of buying come in from one of these individuals, right? All we need is one name to actually lead us. Once that single name starts to lead, a lot of the other names will also follow through here as well. Um, we're already in this trade, I believe. And what I'm looking for here is going to be a break above some type of structure. So the structure that we have in terms of our actual setup here is going to be the overnight high level. So what I was looking for here is I wanted NVIDIA to actually lead this push up. And then once it was able to do that, I would like to see this break above overnight high. And I would want to see that initial resistance of overnight high get flipped into support. So just moving fast forward. So, right, exactly as I said, you can see that everything is still selling off a little bit, but what is the ticker that's kind of leading this name? Ticker that's probably going to be leading is going to be NVIDIA, right? Like I said, all you need is one single name to start pulling up to allow us to actually pull up the market, right? So in this case, NVIDIA is going to be pulling, right? And then the second NVIDIA gets a back test, right? We see that we also start to sell off as well, just because all of these other individuals, right, Apple, Microsoft, and Google, they still haven't gained that traction yet to actually hold up the market, right? Because all of these names right here, as of right now, is still relatively weak. So you see that once Nvidia actually starts losing that traction, that allowed QQQ to pull down. So moving forward now, once again, right, a lot of these individual names are still stalling or are still relatively weak. But the second NVIDIA starts moving one direction, right, what does that do with our, QQQ or NQ, right? We get a nice little wick that kind of came in right there. Notice the wick is not going to be as long as the NVIDIA wick that we have right here, right? It's more about, roughly about 50% of this current candle, whereas NVIDIA, gained back about 75% of that current candle. Now, what is the reasoning for that? Well, we can see here, even though these names here are actually still basing roughly around the same area, what's happening with Google here, right? Google is actually still starting to get a little bit of a sell here. So if Google actually was continuing to base here right above, this 160.5, I guarantee that Q's actually would have also had a very similar move as Nvidia, and it would have filled at least 75% of that candle with a wick. But like I said, because Google's bringing the market down a little bit more, right? QQQ isn't able to make up, the same move that Nvidia had right there. Once again, right, I am keeping an eye out on all of these individuals to see whether or not they want to use these areas as support. So now this structure is really important here. This will be technically a textbook setup, just looking at individuals alone as confluence. Why is that? We're getting multiple taps of support coming in from every single individual here, which means that if they start to gain some traction here, this will be a huge move up. And I believe when we're actually in this trade, I pretty much called the target, right? We should see a push up to that 471, and I believe that's actually what we got here. But let's take a look and break down some of these individuals a little bit more. So what do we have coming here from SPY? SPY, very similar structure to QQQ, as we did get that break above that overnight high level, right? So this is going to be a very important level, as we broke above previous resistance and used it as support. How do we know we're using as support? We know that because this following 5-minute candle ended up closing above that level, right? And remember, that's going to be one of the most important things, is that we actually use this level as support. And then another thing that's going to be important with SPY here is that we're getting what type of backtest? We're getting a backtest into VWAP here. So VWAP, once again, right, is going to be used as some type of support and resistance area, similar to how we use previous high and previous low of day. So this right here is going to be a backtest of some type of support. QQQ here is still doing alright. As I mentioned, what we were looking for was this candle to hold above this 5-minute or this overnight high level. So yes, we were starting to pull below it right now, but remember, we always want to go by the 5-minute candles or just the candle closes, because remember, the candles tell the story of how price will move. Apple here, continuing to hold its previous high of day, meaning that there is still some type of buying presence coming in within this area, right? We see that we have some nice little wicks coming in from the bottom end, which means that, there is buying pressure still present, because even though the bears are trying to pull us down, right, they get bought up every single time, And what you'll notice, there really isn't a whole lot of wickage towards the top, which means that even though bulls are trying to push us up, right, there really isn't a whole lot of selling pressure coming in from the actual, upper end here. Another thing that's also going to be nice here is that Microsoft is also starting to pull down towards that previous high of day. So once it actually is able to get this back test in the previous high of day, this could actually send us up as well. And now with Google, even though yes, it did get that break of that structure, where are we now tapping into? We are now actually tapping into that overnight low level, which is going to be right similar to previous high and low of day. This is going to be potentially used as a range break or a range hold, right? So because we're at this overnight low level, I would like to see this, level be held on Google and for us to actually bounce up there. Nvidia here, perfect break and retest of structure here, right? We had that initial bull flag structure consolidated, and then we got that following opening 5-minute candle to close above that upper trend line. So once we actually got that close above that upper trend line, the following candle allowed us to get a back test, right? It got that back test into 1, that upper trend line, 2, the previous high of day, and 3, VWAP. So those are 3 confluences when it comes to actually getting a back test. And now what we would like to see, that following 5-minute or this current following candle to actually close above this upper trend line there. Obviously, if Nvidia was to actually close below VWAP and close below previous high of day, I guarantee that setup would be pretty much completely invalid, and that would probably actually follow through with a lot of the other names as well. If Nvidia had that break lower, that would probably cause Apple to get that candle close below high of day, Microsoft to get that candle close below high of day, and then Google to break below that overnight lows. But once again, we're going to fast forward here. Beautiful candle close, right? What type of candle close is this? What type of structure are we getting? Well, 1, right, that's the exact thing we were looking for. We're looking for QQQ to hold above that overnight highs, as that would be a break and retest of structure, which indicates that this once area of resistance now is going to get flipped into support there. What type of candle is this? This is also a standing hammer, which is one of the second most bullish candles. But because it did close as a red candle, technically, this is one of the weakest red candles, as it did close as a hammer. Okay. Once again, nice structure coming in from Nvidia here as well, right? We got that break, we got that retest of that upper trend line, and now we are using that as support. So with that being said, this now should actually allow us to send higher coming in from Nvidia after we got that back test. So this following candle here on Nvidia should be able to get this push up to that overnight highs, and even probably a push up above that 120 area. So if we take a look, fast forward. Yeah, beautiful push. So like I said, right, once these names start confluencing with each other, right, once Nvidia starts pushing up, once Apple starts pushing up, Microsoft finds the support, right, this will start to send us higher as we're getting extra confluence from every single ticker, right? It isn't just going to be one individual ticker, like how we had this morning with Nvidia holding up the market and driving the market up. Because once we actually start getting every single name to follow through as well, right, that's going to be the overall tech strength we need to actually push for a new high day. And you'll see that once these names start moving, that's all we really need, right? Microsoft is gaining some traction, right? Google is still actually holding this overnight lows, and then here's Nvidia, right? And Nvidia is definitely going to be driving this push here. But once again, right, it's not like any of these other names are continuing to sell anymore, right? They're actually starting to gain a little bit of traction, which is why this push is actually happening, and we're continuously putting in a new high here, right? Yep, still moving up really nicely. And then if we go back now to yesterday's move, right, on QQQ, right, we had a beautiful trend day literally the whole entire time. Now let's actually take a look at how all of those individuals moved after getting that break. So this was Apple's move yesterday. Beautiful push up. Here's Microsoft. Yeah, literally just overall a great hold that came in literally from every single name here. I believe even Google, yeah. Well, actually, it looks like Google may have actually continued to sell down a little bit. Oh no, we got bought up a little bit towards 10 o'clock, but yeah, definitely the driver for that initial trade right there, right, was going to be the strength that was coming in from, those individuals. And then remember, the main names that I am keeping an eye out on is going to be Apple and Nvidia. Why are those the names that I keep an eye out on most? Well, the reason for that is because they have the highest weighted average percentage, right? So these two names, if they start to correlate together and they start moving in one direction, a lot of times that's going to allow, the push we need, whether or not Microsoft and Google are also following along. Because you see here, Google, right, actually continued to sell off, even though the rest of tech was actually continuing to put in a new high. Um, you can see that from Apple here. Yeah, Apple clean break above VWAP, which allowed us to send higher. Once again, we had that break above that overnight high level. Remember, what is this indicating to us on NVIDIA here? Once we get this break above overnight high and previous high of day, it's pretty much guaranteed to be, almost a trend day, as there really is no resistance really sitting overhead, right? And once again, this 119 level, that was going to be that breakout level on the larger structure. So once we actually got that clear above, it was pretty much a straight shot up to fill this actual, I believe, 4-hour imbalance that I actually had. And once we actually fill that level to 122, that's when we actually start to see a little bit of stalling coming from some of those names. But like I said, all we need is just these individuals to confluence with each other. If it's all telling us the same exact thing, we should expect, the same exact move to come in from QQQ or NQ. All right. Any questions on this so far? No.
Uh, Alex, I have a question. Okay,
What's up?
so what what happened if Apple and Nvidia
Mhm.
does not align? And does that mean it is better not to take trade until they both move the same direction, or what's your
So
suggestion?
yeah, when these two actually are not correlating, we've actually had days like this before where they're not correlating, right? So
Yeah,
what you then want to do is take a look at the other individuals, right? A lot of times, right, one of these names or a good chunk of them will correlate with at least one of them, right? It's either going to be like Apple is selling off and Nvidia is going up, right? But how is the overall rest of the tech market doing? Is Microsoft continuing to sell off or is it going up? Is Google selling off or is it going up, right? So whatever name or whatever sectors is performing similar to either Nvidia and Apple, a lot of times that will actually drive the market towards that direction. Because like I said, you only need one name to potentially hold up the market. So maybe with the tech here, let's just say Nvidia was selling off, Microsoft was selling off, and Google was selling off, right? But then the only name that was actually kind of basing or holding up a little bit better was going to be Apple. What is that going to tell us with QQQ? Yes, we probably will actually still continue to sell off, but it may not be as aggressive, right? And one thing that you'll actually see when that we've actually seen that before, when that actually happens, a lot of times you'll see SPY start to sell off a lot quicker than QQQ because we have Apple currently holding up QQQ, whereas the rest of the tech market is going to be selling off. So, yes, we may still continue to get a one directional move. Um, However, right, if one of those individuals is going to be holding up, it may not be as aggressive of a fall, right? If all of these names are correlating with each other, though, then that's when we'll see, that higher volatility move start to come in. Does that make sense?
yes.
All right, cool. All right, so I think that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about today. But there obviously is still a lot more other, external factors that will come into play, which I think I'll actually like to cover with next week's class. But um, yeah, for today we did actually cover, how to kind of use these individuals, right? But next week, what I want to actually get into is, how we could actually create an overall bias for the week. Not necessarily a bias, but an overall thesis for how we should expect the trading week to be, and the reasoning why we come into the pre-market and actually chart these levels and actually take a look at more of the larger time frames. Because remember, a lot of these setups that I take is going to be in correlation to the larger structure. So if the larger structure is telling me something, a lot of times I'm going to incorporate that into my actual day trades for where I'm expecting, more of these larger levels to actually hold. Okay. So right now, actually, you could see we are getting a break above previous day's range here on QQQ, which means that we could actually continue to see a push towards the end of day. But one thing that is going to be important here is that you do want to see at least a back test of the structure. So we see here, oh yeah, very, very nice structure. So we did, right, this red line is going to be previous high of day. We got that candle break above, and then we got what? We got a back test, right? This back test then got flipped to support, right? What was once resistance over here, flipped to support, which now this should allow us to send higher, probably up towards this previous level up here, up to 475.60.
Alex, sorry, quick question on here. Okay.
Yep.
On the QQQ, you just mentioned the overnight, no, the previous day high being tested,
Yep.
and then it flipped to support.
Mm-hmm.
So on that particular candle, were you where will you be your entry point, or you just doing analysis?
Technically, your entry point probably would have been on the back test of this candle, right? Once we got this breakout, remember this is going to be similar to when we play, if you're a breakout trader and you're trading a flag, remember your confirmation candle is going to be the candle close above, and then your entry, you're looking to either enter on that following candle close, or you're looking to enter on a back test of that trend line, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you're in the setup, right, with the flag, your stop is going to be obviously a break below, pull back inside that structure, and then you're going to be looking for another leg up, right? But as you know, for me, right, we are reversal traders. So for me, I would have taken my entry at the lower trend line. So my risk would have been a stop below the actual flag, and then my reward would have been increased. So in this case, technically, I actually would have looked for an entry a lot earlier, probably off this double top right here. So we can see here, we had a nice little demand right here. I probably would have actually looked to enter on one of these back tests here for a long, and my targets actually would have been up to previous high of day. And obviously, if we got a little bit more, that would have been good. But right, we can see definitely with this candle here, technically you would be a breakout trader here if you were waiting for this confirmation candle close above. So when we got that confirmation candle close above, right, this is going to actually initiate our range breakout. So we will take our entry off the back test of this previous high of day. Your stop would be a candle close back below that, and then you would probably look for the next level of liquidity, which probably is going to be back up to, yeah, like I said, this roughly 475.60 area, right about there. A little bit more confluence would have to be on the larger time frame, like the 30-minute or hourly time frame, as that would really confirm a larger structure breakout. However, it can be a little bit difficult at times to actually trade this on a 5-minute structure, as remember, we're seeing intraday price action, right? It's not going to give us a full-on, hourly or 30-minute, time frame breakout, which it can be, like I said, a little bit risky to trade that, but yeah, I don't hate this. I don't hate this at all. So that would be how I trade that right there. Any other questions with that?
Oh no, thank you.
All right, yeah, so I think that's pretty much it for me today. What I want to cover next week, I want to actually continue to pick back up with this next week. As I mentioned, covering my strategy, we're not going to get it done in one class because there's a lot more to it than just looking at the individual names, right? It comes down to, looking and creating your weekly watch list for potential targets, looking for potential imbalances on the larger time frame. Just understanding how to actually read price action, charting your levels correctly, and then other indicators as well, like maybe using fib, right? Fib can, you guys know I use that quite a bit. Um, so I think that's what we'll actually cover with next week's class then. But yeah, if there's no other questions here, we're gonna pretty much wrap things up right about here, and then we'll pick things up with our next class on Friday then. All right. All right.
Yes, thank you, Alex.